your manifestation already exists in a parallel universe. Hello and welcome to Spiritual Silvera, where we discuss spiritual concepts and connect them with the rational depth of science. This video is the first part of the Parallel Universe series, which I consider one of the most powerful interpretations of manifestations. What's interesting about this topic is that it is also an actual interpretation of quantum theory, which is known as the many-world interpretation. The many worlds The interpretation of quantum mechanics holds that there are many worlds which exist in parallel in the same space and time as our own. The existence of the other worlds makes it possible to remove randomness and action at a distance from quantum theory and thus from all physics. This is one of those topics that overlaps with spirituality to such an extent that it often forces us to ask the question, who am I? Which sounds like something that we only discuss in spirituality circles. This further goes on to reveal how these different disciplines are connected to one another. Why is time itself parallel? There is a very specific reason why we use the term parallel to describe these infinite universes of all possibilities. The word parallel in this context must not be taken too literally but rather metaphorically as to what it implies in a much more vague and qualitative sense. In geometry, we say two lines are parallel when they move together and are a constant distance away from one another, never to meet one another. Similarly, two parallel universes are kind of disjointed in a sense that they do not intersect or normally meet. It is our consciousness that binds these parallel universes together, giving the illusion of motion and time. It is interesting to note that both the concept of motion and time are inseparable. We witness the passage of time through motion, whether it is by noticing a moving car, or simply noticing the arms of a clock move. We measure time through the position of something relative to its own previous position. These two positions of the same car, in the same example, exist in two parallel universes. It is our consciousness that experiences these two positions separately, and our minds connect them. This connection creates the illusion of motion and the illusion of time. What I'm trying to say is that change is what creates the experience of time. Without change, time would seem to be at a standstill. Another implication of the word parallel in the context is that no universe comes after or before an adjacent one. This is important to grasp because we normally think of time as this linear concept that flows in one direction, as if it is predetermined by some external force. But fundamentally, they are all of equal importance relative to each other, stacked on top of one another yet not sequentially. However, we experience them sequentially as it is a constraint of three-dimensional experience. I have deliberately called this a constraint and not a limitation because the latter word often has negative connotations. This constraint is also what makes our three-dimensional experience enjoyable. If there was no sense of the past or present, we would have to experience everything in the now. Everything would get muddled up inside our heads. Imagine watching a 3-hour film that has been sped up to just 1 second. In theory, you would have watched the entire thing, but it wouldn't have made any sense to you. Your brain can process so many scenes at once to make the process enjoyable. Our lives can be thought of like a photo album. It is impossible to view the entire album at once. Even if you did, your limited attention would be split among all the photos, resulting in a lower quality of experience, and those individual photos would be hazy at best. This is the reason why we view photos one at a time. We must empty the vessel of our conscious mind before we pour something new onto it. Our memories are what create this illusion of time. We remember stuff so that we can weave individual instances into now and make sense of them in their entirety. Your desired reality already exists. To extend our previous discussion, since it is only our experience that creates this sense of before and after, everything that has happened, will happen, and can happen already exists in the universe, stacked on top of one another simultaneously. This stack isn't a three-dimensional one like a deck of cards, but rather a higher dimensional one that can be perceived at its own level. What this means is that your desired reality and undesired reality are kind of, in a sense, equidistant from your current reality. Remember, like I said before, nothing is of higher precedence than another. It is our perception of our current reality that creates this higher or lower importance. Our limited reasoning and understanding of cause and effect is something we take too seriously simply because we assign importance to our five senses a little too much. Anything that is beyond our perception is simply considered to be as good as false. Science bears witness that, at a quantum level, this idea of cause and effect vanishes. The effects and causes are brought down to the same level. The electron literally vanishes from one corner within its orbital cloud to teleport to another location. This is nothing short of supernatural if we take into consideration the constraints of classical physics, where an object moves based on certain understood laws of physics. And besides, when it comes to these laws, we have simply noticed and observed them. We did not create it, and therefore there are parts of it that are still black boxes to our conscious minds. We still do not know them in their entirety or what caveats there are to some of them. Based on the laws of physics, our reality follows the trail of cause and effect. We all know that the effect follows the cause. But this sense of linearity is a constraint of our three-dimensional world. These laws are what hold the fabric of linearity and three-dimensional space together to maintain consistency. But in terms of pure consciousness, the cause and effect are independent of one another. When it comes to manifesting anything, there are different schools of thought. The law of attraction teaches us to attract something into our lives as if it were something external. While I'm not trying to criticize the idea as it has worked quite well for countless people, I do find it a bit out of reach. I often think in terms of creating the final outcome. This is where we should often remind ourselves that creation itself is already finished and we are simply bringing it to the forefront of our consciousness. This inadvertently makes me want to think of the how, because we are fundamentally logical creatures. Thinking in terms of parallel universes helps me override that sense of logic immediately. We think in terms of pure effect and let the universe justify it through causes that our limited conscious minds aren't designed to handle.